Here's a little FYI. When I hit you with that stunner, it is what it is. Some guys go to the knees. Some guys just stay on their feet and stretch your hamstrings out. And I always tell people when I give them a stunner, I said, I'm going to kick you in the gut. I'll grab you by the back of your neck and go down. I said, grab me by my waist, grab a base, and go with me. And then it is what it is. And I tell most people, I said, don't put your tongue between your teeth. Because I'm not shooting with it. It's a work move. Yeah. But, I mean, if you go down and you got your tongue between your teeth like Michael Jordan going for a badass basketball shot, you're probably going to bite your tongue off.
Go ahead, pop off, me and my clique put on. I'm like a young McMahon, I'm here to get your bitch off. Woo! Like I'm Ric Flair, little finger to the big boss. Man, a.k.a. police, cause I'm over your head like hit toss.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to episode 5 of the Middle-Aged Outlaws podcast. I'm Ross, I'm here with Adam as always, and we are here today to talk about our top 5 finishing moves. Adam, this is the first time we recorded this year. Happy New Year. How you doing?
Happy New Year. Yeah, not bad, thanks. You?
I'm alright, thanks. Have you recovered from being blackballed in the podcasting and wrestling industry from Bret Hart after we kept him off our top 5 goats in the last episode?
Yeah, I mean, it probably would have been nice to be blackballed. We just need him to find out so we can maybe get, just a little bit of heat from him. That'd be good.
You're looking for heat?
I think from someone like Bret Hart, yeah, absolutely. Because he would just speak about it for years.
Well, do you know what? I might have a little bit more heat to throw at Bret Hart for this episode, so let's see what we can do for you. Okay, finishing moves. Let's get into them. But before we get into our list, what for you makes a good finishing move? Finishing moves are a really funny thing, aren't they? Because like outside of kayfabe, like you're kind of getting into the realms of Mortal Kombat and video games, but within kayfabe, what makes a good finishing move for you?
I think there's a few things that I would look at, and it's not just about the move; it's about how it's sold and things like that. You've had so many like iconic moves over the years, and then you get all these matches where people are kicking out of each other's finishers non-stop, and that's great on the day and on the night you're watching it, but where do you go from there? Then if the next person doesn't kick out of it, are they less than? And I always think, except in the big events and the big matches and the superstar against superstar, that it should be the end. I think it should end the match. I prefer there to be a moving in a 3 count rather than a submission being the finisher.
Okay.
Just personal preference. There are some great submissions that have been out there that have been really successful, but what I go more towards is the move and then the 3 count. And I think I've always liked a move that can be performed on anyone, regardless of their size. And there's a few things I can talk about when we're going into our list, but you sometimes go into a match and you think, well, that guy can't possibly perform his finisher because he needs to be able to lift this guy over his head, and the guy's 400 pounds or something like that. So yeah, my preference is something that can be performed on any opponent, and there's some appeal as well. I've always thought of a combination, like you can see somebody setting it up like 1-2 and then the third move is the finisher type thing. So yeah, that's just a few things, but so much of it is about how it's sold.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I think when we get into our lists, we'll see that that a lot of these moves, I would say, are protected. Probably the wrestler it's about the wrestler that's given them as well, but I think if the organisation that the person is in, if they are protecting that wrestler and they're protecting the finish, it just builds it up so much better. Just on your point about them kicking, guys kicking out of finishing moves, it happens a lot more these days than what it did back when we were kids, and finishing moves were essentially boom, finishing move, it's over, and you know it's over, and very rarely, and I don't really remember. I may be looking back with rose-tinted glasses here, but I think when we were younger, like in the 90s sort of thing, that it didn't really happen. That whereas you watch an NXT, AEW, random episode of Raw, you've got guys kicking out at finishers non-stop almost. Like you look at that Drew McIntyre, Brock Lesnar WrestleMania 36 match, and a lot of Brock Lesnar's more recent matches, and it's basically spamming finishers until you can put the guy down.
Yeah, and I think I touched on before. I don't mind it as much in the WrestleMania main event or something like that. I think it's a way of making both guys look strong when that's the appropriate thing to do. But sometimes the loser doesn't need to look that strong. A guy who's been champion 20 times or something like that. Yeah. He can fail to kick out of a finisher, and you can look at it and say, well, I don't find it hard to believe he'll be a main event guy again because he's been there, so often before.
Yeah.
But I think when you've got like an up and coming guy and his move gets kicked out of, by someone established, and you have to do 3 or 4 of them to actually put the guy away, it does leave you thinking, where do you go next?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've got some examples here of some kind of what I think are rubbish, bad finishing moves, and also some dangerous finishing moves as well. These are more, I would say, some of these more dangerous ones. Hopefully, none of these creep up on your list. Were more older ones, but something that we'd posted on the Instagram page was the Beverly Brothers, and their finishing move, which was called the Shaker Heights Spike, which was just ridiculous. One of them lifts the guy up, the other one spikes their head like an American football.
Yeah.
What was that?
It looks impossible to do safely. I can't work out, looking at it, how there isn't an injury every time that happens. Terrifying.
That's unbelievable. Obviously, the Doomsday Device, who did they broke someone's neck, didn't they? Henry Godwin?
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm pretty sure it was, yeah.
And any time I think of the Doomsday Device now, I think about that story about Vince taking the Doomsday Device in a nightclub or in a strip joint or something like that. Absolute madness. But like that was a great finishing move when we were younger. But you look back on it now and you would never see that. That was just left up to gravity to decide where the guy landed. Yeah,
there's so often when you look back at the matches, the times you're just looking thinking that's going to be a broken neck, and somehow I think it
Oh, we lost you there for a sec. Sorry, Adam. Go on.
Yeah, I think seeing some of these, especially some of these tag team finishers, and somebody getting knocked off somebody's shoulders and spinning, and you're just watching, thinking that their head is going straight into the mat and they're going to break their neck, and it's. I think that they always looked really impressive, but it's too dangerous. I don't think they would ever be approved now. I don't think those kind of moves would, not in a mainstream organisation regularly anyway.
There was another move when you're talking about broken necks that Pat, who is a fan of the show, hi Pat, thanks for listening, he made me aware of on Instagram. He commented on that Beverly Brothers post and linked me to a move called the Steiner Screwdriver. I don't know if you've seen this, Adam, but essentially Scott Steiner puts a guy up in a suplex, then drops them down in a pile driver.
Okay, I don't think I've ever seen that.
It's the most dangerous looking thing I've ever seen in my life. There's a compilation of it on YouTube. If you'd like to raise your blood pressure at all, it's well worth watching.
I will, just out of morbid curiosity.
Some of the more awful finishing moves that I was thinking about before we came on here. This might be controversial. People's elbow.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think at that stage that he started using that, he could basically get anything over and make anything work. And I think it was a little bit of a nod to the leg drop, actually. And I've read something about him jokingly saying, "No, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that in a real match to other wrestlers," and they were like, "Yeah, he's not going to do it." And then, yeah, he did, and the crowd popped. But isolate it from the person who's doing it and the reaction, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, admittedly, he didn't always use people's elbows as his finishing move. He had rock bottom, but I was watching a match with a person who was the champion at the time, and The Rock put him away with the people's elbow. I just thought, you're burying someone there. Anyway, another move that I felt was just really quite, is it essentially a body slam, but being done round the shoulders, was the angle slam.
Yeah, I suppose he usually combined it with the ankle lock, didn't he? So he would do the slam and then the ankle lock. But yeah, I don't know, were they just trying to play on the authentic wrestler
the Olympic
skills?
thing, aye.
Yeah.
I think so. It's a bit rubbish.
Yeah.
And finally, Adam, this is more, I mean, it's the move's all right, and you might not even have seen this if you've not been keeping up to date with current stuff, but Matt Riddle or the Riddler or whatever they're going to call him next week does a finishing move which is part tombstone, part just kind of landing on the guy in the 69 position, called the Bro Derek.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've seen this, no.
Why is it called the Bro Derek? Is Bo Derek a huge... is he a big Bo Derek fan? It's the same guy walking around offering people bro nuts and broger or whatever it is. So maybe I'm looking into it too much.
But yeah, you've got to assume if you're raising your eyebrows and questioning that surely plenty of other viewers are as well, thinking, why? What?
Matt Riddle is a huge 1960s movie fan, clearly. So, let's jump in to our top 5 lists of our top 5 finishing moves. Hopefully there's no Bro Derricks or people's elbows or, I don't know, Steiner screwdrivers. Adam, who or what is your number 5?
Okay, so my number 5, to be honest, I messed around with the order of these quite a bit because I think it was only the first couple that I was particularly passionate about in terms of the order, but I've gone with the F5 at number 5. So the move is popularised by Brock Lesnar. I was trying to do a bit of research to find out where some of these moves originated, and it seems there was a Japanese wrestler called Itsuko Maita or Maita. I have probably mispronounced horribly. Who created this move, and it's evolved a bit over time. It doesn't actually look that much like what Lesnar executes now, which is the lift the opponent onto the shoulders, spin and drop them face first onto the mat. This more involved actually landing on the opponent, which made it look a bit more dangerous.
Sounds it.
And there was kind of an evolution from that into a very similar move called a Death Valley Driver. And then from that came the F5. Many of the reasons I liked it, obviously Lesnar, his original run, he comes in, he's this ridiculously hyped character. They're referring to him as the next big thing right from the off. And I talked earlier about the fact that for me, a good finisher, you have to be able to do it to anyone. And this move normally you shouldn't be able to do to some people, but I've seen him do it to the Big Show. He can get basically anyone up on his shoulders.
Yep.
And it's also very rarely, it has happened, but it's very rarely been kicked out of. So obviously you talked about WrestleMania, there's been instances with The Undertaker as well, but it's generally been a pretty well protected move.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like especially when he first burst on the scene, as like you said, the next big thing, he was destroying everybody with the F5. And it was really, really well protected. I think it's more in his latter run that it became a bit more frequent that people were kicking out of it. But yeah.
Yeah. So I listed, there were a couple of, just when I was looking it up, trying to think of instances when I've kind of just watching popped for an F5, and one of them was for probably the reason that I thought he'd maybe broken his neck. Is he used the move when he beat Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 19 after he'd messed up a
Jesus.
shooting star press and fallen on his head.
Is that one of the worst things that you've ever seen in
Yeah.
a wrestling match?
Yeah, I mean,
Apart from Sid Justice jumping off the ropes that time.
why have you reminded me of that?
Sorry.
But yeah, because I think the other thing about it is that they're obviously putting on a bit of a clinic, but I can't remember the exact order of the matches, but the crowd was a bit dead because I think what most people saw as the biggest match had already been on. Was it like Austin? Was it like Rock Hogan or something like that? Or
Was that Mania 18?
he won it at 19, so
19. Rock
it's
Austin was
maybe-
at 19.
It might have been just in yes, that's what it would have been, and I think everyone would have associated Rock Austin as being, it should be the main event.
No, you're right.
So the crowd had kind of died a little bit, which is a shame because they put on a really good match, and he didn't need to do the shooting star press, and he shouldn't have tried to do the shooting. Not a guy that size, there was no need for him to do it.
Have you seen the footage of him doing the shooting star press in OVW?
I have, yeah.
It's amazing,
and he just lands it. And
That's incredible.
Yeah, and again, I think that he'll have wanted the spectacle, a guy that size, a guy that big being able to execute it. But he actually, got his bearings and was able to perform the F5 to win it. And the other time that it just jumped into my mind, and I couldn't remember the year, I had to look it up, but when he made his comeback, which was 2012, and he just walks out on Raw, and sort of confronts Cena and just immediately lifts Cena up into the F5 and executes it, and it was a very exclamation mark, I'm back.
Yeah.
And I'm now, I will rule the WWE again. So yeah, it's still, I think he came back and just reminded everyone what that move was, and on the biggest star in the company at the time.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think full disclaimer, F5 was my number 2
Okay.
on my list. Whenever I think of the F5, I think of it being like really protected when he had the classic black trunks, and
Yeah.
when he first came out, and putting Hogan away with the chair shots in the F5 on the chair. When he won the title, when he was the youngest ever winner of the title, I think it was a SummerSlam against The Rock. Or was it 2002 maybe?
That must be about right, yeah.
He was just a beast, and I just think that move just typified kind of like what he was and what they were selling him as, just a wrecking machine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I like that. When I was looking into it, similar to you, and I kind of read that Lesnar had been watching Japanese wrestling, and he'd been trying to come up with various things, and it had been John Laurinaitis that had suggested to him put these two moves together and try and do that. So Johnny Ace is useful for some things.
Yeah, when I was researching this, his name came up a few times actually. I think he is somebody who they maybe look at for finishers, because he seems to have suggested a few things over the years.
Not great at finding one-legged wrestlers, but he's good with old finishing moves.
Brilliant.
Okay, so F5 for you, for number 5. For my number 5, I'm going with the RKO out of nowhere.
Nice.
Again, originated by our man Johnny Ace, when he used to use a similar type of thing as the Ace Crusher. That's his finishing move.
Yeah.
We had DDP doing it in WCW, also a kind of variation of it as a diamond cutter. But obviously it's been popularised by Randall Keith Orton. And yeah, I'm with you that a finishing move ideally should be able to be done to anyone, and ideally, like at any time.
Yeah.
And the RKO is a perfect example of that. Obviously, it got the meme treatment some years ago, which is that's quite cool. When things kind of cross over into like popular culture, then it's only good for wrestling. At least it wasn't for something silly. It was for like a cool sort of wrestling move. So yeah, RKO's just kind of legendary at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a big fan, and like you say, I think the execution, which can be so sudden, and the RKO out of nowhere. And I remember, I couldn't tell you which WrestleMania it was, but I was watching a match, whatever Orton's match was at the Mania, and it was the first time I'd seen, I think somebody jumped off the top rope to execute a move, and he just caught them midair, performed the RKO, and I was just like watching, thinking that's so cool, just to be able to do that, to get the timing spot on and everything like that. And it's again been pretty well protected. That there have obviously been instances of people getting out of it, but you always know that unless he's up against one of the top stars, that in all likelihood it would be match ending.
Yeah. A couple of instances to talk about. I think one of them would be the kind of infamous stupid RKO, when he hit Kofi Kingston with it, and he took it. I think that's maybe 10 years ago now. It might not be as much as that, but I think it's around 10 years ago when Kofi was probably still hailing from Kingston, Jamaica, and he took it really badly, and he could have hurt himself. Do you remember this? And Randy's going, stupid.
I don't actually. I do remember there being a programme between the two, because I think everyone hoped it would be the breakout for Kingston, which didn't end up happening for like 10 years or something like that. But I don't remember the instance of it.
This apparently buried Kingston's push, and then I think they revisited it when Kofi won the title just recently, there a couple of years ago, and they went all back to it and all that. But more importantly and more impressively, my favourite RKO moment is WrestleMania 31. You had Randy fighting Seth Rollins. Have you seen this?
Yes.
So they go back and forward a lot, and you've got this at the point when Seth is with the Authority, and he's got two security guards, and you've got Jamie Noble as one of the security guards just kind of diving head first towards Randy at one point, and obviously gets hit with RKO, and the other guy does the same. They go back and forward. Eventually, Seth goes for his curb stomp, runs for the corner, puts his, jumps up, foot on the back of Randy's neck, and somehow Randy flips him up in the air. Seth goes away up in the air, comes back down to the RKO. It's just amazing.
Nice.
It's just really, really cool.
Yeah.
I was looking into that a little bit, and Rollins was on Talk Is Jericho talking about that, and they'd been talking about it in advance and trying to get it right, and they couldn't get it right. So they never ever actually managed to do it before they did it on the night. They'd been practicing and couldn't get it, and Randy was apparently so excited that they'd hit it that he forgot to cover him. And the referee, I don't know, I think they said it was Mike Kyoto, had said to him, cover him. But it's just a brilliant example. It can be hit out of nowhere, but also just a really cool reversal.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, RKO. So yeah, what you got number 4?
Number 4. So this happens to me every time we do a podcast, and I look at something, I think that's one I want to include, and then I look for the instances when it was actually used, and I'm like, how come I can't find more? I'm still going with it. The DDT.
Nice.
So when I was young, Jake the Snake Roberts was one of my favourites. He was, almost always through his run a bad guy, or there was, even when he was a babyface, there was something sinister about him. He was carrying a snake. He gave these incredibly cold promos, and it just there was always this edge about him. And the DDT was again a really well protected move.
Absolutely.
And actually, you heard it mentioned more than you actually saw it. It would just be, he would mention it in promos. He would talk about, the fact that if all he needs is a second to kind of DDT and it's lights out and things like that. So when I was doing my little bit of research, this was first performed by a Mexican wrestler named Black Gordman, and that was in the 1970s. So it was then popularised by Jake Roberts. A few others have done it, or versions of it since, but it's just become a more routine move. I think Mick Foley used to use a double arm DDT as part of his repertoire. And it was one of those, again, moves that can be so sudden. Basically you can't let yourself go in a headlock to Jake Roberts, or he can just DDT you. He was always a bit coy when he was asked about what it actually stood for, but the abbreviation comes from a pesticide.
Oh, wow.
But when he was asked to explain the name in an interview, Jake Roberts asked, what does DDT mean? And he just said, it means the end. Just classic Jake Roberts. That's
dark.
Yeah. It was a move I loved, and I would try and do it to friends on at school and all those things you're not supposed to do, just because it basically looks like a move anyone could execute, but when he did it, you knew there was something more about it that the person wasn't getting up.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I think this is just one of those where you remember what you remember was cool as a kid. But one of my favourite instances of it, do you remember the WrestleMania 7 blindfold match?
Oh, yes.
Against Rick Martel.
Oh, really hoping that's what you were going to mention there. Yeah, of course.
So, like, the sort of tension of knowing that at a point he's going to be able to get him in the DDT.
Get his hands on him.
And basically, it's a match where nothing happened. They're both, like, pointing at trying to help get the crowd to help them find the guy, and then I think at a point Jake falls out of the ring because he gets nudged the wrong way, and it's probably because clearly they can see, they can actually see. It must have been one of the easiest nights of pay that anyone's ever had. And then when he does lock it in and executes the DDT and he's reaching around trying to find him to cover him because he's still playing the blindfold, gets the cover and gets the 3 count. So I don't know why, but that's just always stuck in my head as one of my favourite ever instances of seeing it executed.
God, how easy were we entertained as children? And all those, they would have held them captive in that building. That's one of those matches that stayed with me my whole life. I can remember that like it was yesterday.
Yeah,
it's a brilliant match.
And my memory, and I think that when I was looking into it, kind of backed this up, because he never really had a run with Hogan, who was, the guy who would kick out finishers back in the day and do his hulking up. He did have slight programs with Warrior at times, but he never really executed the DDT on him. He had programs with Savage, again, never really executed the DDT on him. And it was one of those moves where I think it seemed more important because it was fairly rare. He would win matches with other moves. It wasn't always a DDT. So seeing it just kind of felt that bit special. And yeah, the memory I have of it finally being, somebody kicking out of it was Undertaker at WrestleMania.
Nice.
And that was obviously to put Taker over because they were building him at that stage. And I think it just shows the sort of esteem the move was held in, the fact that we're going to have this guy kick out of that. That's, to help build him up. So, yeah, it was... When I started doing my research, I was like, why hasn't he used it more often? It was a strange experience, but I still felt it warranted inclusion on the list.
That's a great choice. I think a really sad thing about the DDT is it's been completely bastardised throughout the years, and shallowed down to basically a body slam, isn't it?
Yeah, and I remember, I can't remember what platform it was on, whether it was a podcast or a written interview or something. I remember seeing Paul Heyman talking about how sad it was that people feel they have to, jump off the top of a cage or something like that, because all you would need is a guy to execute a move like a DDT or something like that, and nobody kicks out of it for 6 months, and then it's become a big move again. It's the fact that they're used, mid-match as a, very brief spot moment that kind of takes the allure of that kind of thing away.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Have you got an impression of Paul Heyman doing, speaking about that or no?
I think I would have needed some prior warning. I'm not sure. I think all of our listeners would just be switching off at that point.
My bad. My number 4 is a little bit of an odd one. You know when you're doing these lists and you immediately have ones that you think about,
Yeah.
and then sometimes just things come out of nowhere. You wonder where that's come from. But this is a little bit like this. I think if I'd maybe thought about it more, maybe DDT would be on mine because I love that choice. Anyway, this is a weird one, but my number 4 is a frog splash.
Nice.
Not from one person in particular, but I've got 4 guys here that I think execute it all differently, but all in a really cool way. So we had D'Lo Brown. I know that we're both big D'Lo Brown fans from back in the day.
Absolutely. Yep.
His frog splash was cool, really cool. He did it with he tended to have the chest protector thing.
Yeah, he I don't know, cracked some ribs and then wore a chest protector for about 3 years. Cunning.
You can never be too cautious, especially if Scott Steiner's throwing these screwdrivers about the place. So I loved D'Lo's one with the hands between the legs. He's a big guy.
Yeah.
He was pretty agile, and his just looked pretty impressive. We had RVD 5-star frog splash, which was just really impressive. I'd love to have seen that in real life. He was just an innovator, wasn't he? A lot of the things that he did were amazing, but his frog splash was just really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the more impressive sights you would see is him leaping off the turnbuckle. For sort of the way he extended his body for it as well, and rotated as well a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's a good segue because my other 2, one of them is Montez Ford, who's in the Street Profits. Mm-hmm. He does an amazing frog splash. I don't know if you've seen much of them, but a lot of the time his frog splash, he's sort of changing direction and he gets up so high. It's really an impressive thing to see. There's not a lot of impressive things in current wrestling, but that certainly is one of them for me.
Yeah, I have seen it, and it's athletically brilliant because I think there's something about you expect really small guys to do certain moves, and he's not the smallest guy, you know. Mm-hmm. And there's something just it's similar to what's said about D'Lo, you know, something pretty cool about seeing somebody that athletic and being able to execute something that well.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last guy is where the kind of origination, is that right? Where the move originated from,
yeah, that's it.
or was popularised in America. So I don't know if you've heard of a man called Art Barr, but Art Barr was in a tag team in the AAA organisation in Mexico called Los Gringos Locos, the Crazy Americans, with a man that you might know called Eddie Guerrero.
Right.
So Art Barr's finishing move was a frog splash, and Too Cold Scorpio had said to him that he looks like a frog when he does this finishing move off the top rope, so that's where the frog splash came from. Nice. But Art Barr passed away in 1994, so Eddie took this as a tribute to his friend and his old tag team partner, and he'd done it ever since. So so Eddie took that on, and again he was a really impressive user of the frog splash. I really liked his kind of jerky move in midair, and like he was a little guy and he made it work for himself.
Yeah.
And I always remember that first Raw when the Radicals invaded and they jumped in the ring, and he hit it on one of the New Age Outlaws. I'm not sure. He ended up breaking his arm, I'm sure.
Yeah, he did.
And he was in a sling for quite a long time after that. But I really liked Eddie. I think in retrospect, looking back over his career as I've got older, I've appreciated him more than what I did at the time,
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Yeah,
which is sadly quite often it's quite often the case with a lot of things in life. But yeah, he was a really good, he was an amazing wrestler, and yeah, I really liked his frog splash.
yeah.
And just one wee extra one to throw in there. There's also a guy that did a version of the frog splash. It was actually called the tadpole splash, and that was Vince McMahon's illegitimate son, Hornswoggle.
Okay.
Just an incredible version. So yeah, that's my number 4, the frog splash.
Nice. I like it. Did between everyone you've mentioned that executed it, did you have a favourite?
Ooh. I think because of finding out the kind of the history of it with Art Barr and
Yeah.
the tribute and all that, I like that kind of history to it with Eddie, but I really like seeing Montez Ford do that.
Nice.
I'm a big Montez Ford mark, you know this. He's the future of this business.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it was one I looked at and thought about the frog splash, and I think that there were two names that first jumped into my mind, which were Eddie Guerrero and RVD. Shame on me for forgetting about D'Lo.
You better recognise.
I know, and yeah, if he ever heard this, I apologise sincerely. But yeah, I think I really liked Eddie's. Yeah, there was something, the fact he was smaller actually added to it for him, because he fought as an underdog so often,
Yep.
and it was so often the winning move, you know. I think, although he had a little assist, I think when he beat Lesnar for the belt, that's what he used. And he was one nobody really expected him to become world champion, so it was, yeah, he made it seem quite special.
Yeah, absolutely. What you got at 3?
Okay, number 3, I have the pedigree.
Ooh, nice.
So the move was created by Killer Kowalski,
Of course.
who was the trainer of Triple H.
Oh, right.
Well, at the time that Killer Kowalski was using the move, he didn't actually drop to his knees. It sounds really strange. So what he did was he had the pedigree position with the arms hooked and the head between the legs, and then he kind of jumped up, but to jerk the opponent's neck.
Jesus.
Um,
I wonder
whereas-
they called him Killer Kowalski.
So Triple H asked Killer Kowalski if he could use this move, but he was going to add a drop to the knees. And it sounds like, you know, as his trainer and all that, they had a pretty good relationship. Sounds like he was very happy to do it. And it's one that I purely associate with one performer, even though I think Seth Rollins used it for a while.
Yeah.
But it's very much in my mind signature Triple H. And I've always really liked the look of it. It looks like it should be dangerous. You know, the position you've got the opponent's head in, you're then dropping to your knees. Now, you know, logic tells you when you actually figure it out, yeah, the knees are going to hit long before the head hits, and he's pretty safe doing it. But it looks like a finisher that would cause some damage, and obviously, you know, because Triple H would have wanted it this way, but obviously it's been protected through the years. He has at times allowed people to kick out of it. I remember an instance, I think the Ultimate Warrior kicked out of it after about, you know, a half a 1 count on a comeback match that obviously didn't go very well. But other than, you know, for a good few years after that, for a guy that was needing something to hold his own with The Rock as they were coming up, then with Austin, Angle, Undertaker, you know, all these elite, you know, performers, it felt like that was a move that, you know, held up against what they would have had, and
Yep.
if he hit it, he could win the matches.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we've talked Triple H in the past, legacy and things like that, and he's one that I think sometimes the story around him overshadows the performer, and I thought it was just a really cool finisher. and something that he brought that was original. When he started doing it, I'd never seen it. He hadn't even, in my eyes, although, you know, the history of the movie, he hadn't, in my eyes, taken something done by somebody else and put a slant on it. He'd created something his own, and it was original and unique. So yeah, I've gone for the pedigree at 3.
I like it. It's a move that's, I agree with you, it's obviously been protected, but I don't think it's been or disproportionately protected. It's not a silly move. It's a really, really good finishing move. I totally agree with you. It's one, going back to kind of principles that we were talking about, is one that you can stick on anybody.
Yeah.
And it's also one that you can kind of reverse as well. And we've seen a lot of instances of him getting back body dropped outside the ring and on the mats and all that sort of stuff. And I think it sits well against the likes of the stunner and the rock bottom, like you were saying there. Aye, good choice, I think. Just on the subject of Triple H taking people's moves. When I was looking into the RKO, obviously DDP did the Diamond Cutter, and Triple H was in WCW for a cup of coffee when he was terrorising, I think.
Yeah, sure, that's right.
When he came over to WWF, his finishing move, which he started using, was the Diamond Cutter, and DDP had apparently phoned him up and just said, look, like that, I think they were buddies, but he'd said, look, any chance you could stop using that? You kind of just stolen my finishing move. And Triple H, to be fair, had said yes, he'd stop doing it and all that. And DDP had, in the interview that I saw, DDP described him as a classy man.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was Triple H he was referring to.
I know DDP, I think, had a good relationship with Scott Hall. So I can imagine there was a little bit of crossover there, because by that point Triple H probably would have been carrying the bags and all that. So yeah, I can believe that story. I can also, you know, imagine being the guy in WCW, you know, probably just giving Raw a watch to see what he missed or what happened, and being like, that guy's doing my move.
Right, okay, pedigree, number 3. We're doing all right with crossover here. Only one crossover so far. My number 3, I don't know if you're going to be a fan of this. My number 3 is the spear / gore. It's all the same, really, isn't it? My disclaimer for this is that this move is not effective if your opponent is wearing a steel plate underneath their hockey jersey.
Brilliant.
Sorry, Brett. I'm really, really sorry, Brett. Don't bury us again. Now, obviously, Spear was popularised by Goldberg, and although he's now like a raging 50-year-old man pushing Drew McIntyre over on TV, at one point he was like a total wrecking machine in WCW, and for all their faults, they did an absolute amazing job building him up to be this like one-man wrecking machine. The thing that I like about, I'll go on to the other people that use it, but the thing that I liked about Goldberg's spear is that it's almost it's almost a shoot move. The person taking it a lot of the time doesn't really have much sort of say in the matter. Mm-hmm. They're basically there to just take it. And he's went through basically the whole WCW roster, hitting everyone from Rey Mysterio to Big Show with it. So it passes the test of, you know, being able to be performed on anybody.
Yeah.
When doing my research, one of the most devastating versions of Goldberg's spear was him hitting it on 1 of 3 minute warning. I'm just taking a look to see who it was. I think it was, who was it? Jamal and Rosie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's Rosie. He comes out. There's a match going on with Jamal and Booker T. He comes out to help Booker T after Rico, he off the Sideburns fame, and Rosie get in the ring and they're attacking Booker T, and eventually it spills to the outside, and Goldberg hits Rico with the most ridiculous spear. Like, I'm talking about guys that been a shoot move. Like, Rico had no sort of say in that at all. But then he goes to the outside and he hits Rosie. He smashes him through the barricade with a spear. And, like, do you remember the size of the guys?
I do, yeah. They're big guys. Big guys.
They were really good. Yeah. But he smashes them through the barricade. It's brilliant. It's amazing.
I'm a bit worried about Rey Mysterio. Just hearing that he took the spear in his time.
Because just picture him going like spinning through the air, sort of thing, don't you? Yeah. Obviously, there's a few other users of the spear. I loved Rhino's gore. Maybe just because of Heyman going gore, but no, he was smashing. You can think of him smashing people through tables in the corner of the ring.
Yeah,
it was devastating the way that Rhino seemed to do it. On the other hand, I feel like obviously Edge uses the spear as a finishing move, and Roman Reigns uses it as well. But I don't know about you. I feel like particularly Edge's and Roman to a sort of degree as well is a bit too choreographed for my liking.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Almost doesn't look. Well, I was referring to it being a bit like a shoot move with Goldberg.
Yeah.
Like you can see that, but with Edge's especially, it's a bit like, let's delicately place him down on the mat, sort of thing.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I think maybe Edge in particular, I would say that about it. He is one of those guys that I love Edge, and I think he's had one of the great careers. But he maybe didn't have that great finishing move because I'm not sure the spear really worked for him. But yeah, I do know what you mean. I loved Rhinos as well, and Heyman added to it, but I don't think that was the only thing about it. I mean, the guy was a beast, and you look at him and you imagine getting the spear from him. That's going to have some impact.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's mine. I'm assuming you don't have spear on your list.
I don't know. I think you've hit on two that were on my starter for 10 list, which were performed by multiple people, being the spear and the frog splash, and it was almost my sort of indecisiveness over who performed it best and who I would showcase that made me think I'll go in a different direction, because pretty much everything I went for, there was one guy, or one mainstream American wrestler that actually popularised it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, Frog Splash and Spear, I kept thinking of other names. And but it's a move I like, and I think when it's done well, does Goldberg still do it? Does he still?
Well, aye. No, I think he does.
Yeah.
He did the most lackluster jackhammer you'll remember to both The Fiend and The Undertaker in those god-awful Saudi Arabian matches.
I don't want him ever doing a jackhammer on anyone ever again, so it's probably safer for him to do the spear on someone.
I do remember when he came back maybe last year or a couple of years ago, this is more to do with Dolph Ziggler than it is Goldberg, but he kept hitting Dolph Ziggler with spears over and over, and they looked amazing.
Yeah.
Even at that point, but Ziggler's a brilliant seller.
He's a great seller. Probably, he sells like a Shawn Michaels or someone like that.
Yeah.
He's just amazing at it. So, yeah, there's probably a fair bit of the credit to go to Ziggler there.
Okay, let's jump into your number two. My number two was obviously the F5, which we've got to. So let's jump into yours.
Okay, so my number two is the Tombstone Pile Driver. Trying to describe it, although I imagine anyone who's listening to this knows exactly what it looks like, but a kneeling reverse pile driver, innovated by Karl Gotch. It's also been used by a few wrestlers before Undertaker adopted it. Dynamite Kid used it.
Cool.
And Don Morocco also used it.
Yep.
But I personally don't have any memories of seeing it until The Undertaker started using it. I think we've talked about the ability to perform moves on anyone a few times. I've never been aware of a match that I've watched where I thought he couldn't do it. I'm not sure if he ever performed it on Big Show. That probably would have been the toughest one to do. But he performed it on big guys like Kane and people like that.
Yep.
And he also had I think a few other moves that you could get away with if you couldn't for any reason do the tombstone. But the tombstone was kind of the first big Undertaker move. Ended up doing the chokeslam regularly. He ended up with, I forget the name of it, but he had a submission hold that he would use at times later in his career.
Hell's Gate?
Hell's Gate, that's it.
Oh God, that was awful. Sorry.
And he had the last ride as well, which he used at times. But I've always thought of the tombstone as being his finisher.
Yeah.
So he's it has been kicked out of at times. I mean, I suppose if you have the length of career that he had, it's inevitable. But there was a long period of time where it wasn't really. When he first won the title at Survivor Series 1991, he performed the tombstone on Hulk Hogan with an assist of a steel chair that had been slid in by Ric Flair.
Nice.
So it kind of, it protects Hogan to an extent, because you're left wondering he might have kicked out if it hadn't been a chair down there. But it also sold the move, as this move got him a win over Hulk Hogan to win the title, which was obviously pretty rare back then. And again, it was so rare for so many years to see anyone kick out of it. And I think it was only when we got to the emergence of some of the other absolute superstars like Austin and Rock. Triple H, I think, is kicked out of it, but there's Lesnar has as well. There's like this select few, and I think you would have to be that level to be doing that. I think watered down a little bit in the last few years of the career, when he was putting over people like Roman Reigns, who got to kick out of a tombstone. But I think for such a chunk of the career, it was a pretty protected move. And it's one of those where I would, especially as a kid, I would have had no doubt the match was over when it was executed.
Yeah.
And with the whole character, the name was so cool. It just worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a look of being a vicious move, although from the research I was doing, despite one, I think, disputed claim by Hogan that it hurt him once, that it was generally pretty safe. And looking at it, that's quite impressive. I suppose if he's got a tight enough grip of you, he can control exactly how far down your head is and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few instances I really enjoyed seeing it executed. Some the matches he had with Shawn Michaels in the steel cage towards the end of Michaels' career. Sorry, that was Triple H in the steel cage just after Michaels' career had finished. And it just had to perform it more than once on some people. Again, you're talking absolute top level, all-time superstars, so I don't have as big an issue with that.
Yeah.
There was one, I don't know if you would remember this, but there was I think it was WrestleMania 29, where he faced CM Punk, and it was one of those where you'd started to wonder if the streak would be ended, the WrestleMania streak.
It's a great match.
It's a brilliant match. And do you remember Punk goes for the tombstone?
Yeah, I was just funny you say that, because I was just thinking about this. Aye.
Yeah, he was doing this whole, all the way through this disrespect, disrespecting Paul Bearer.
That's a bit. That wasn't very. That was. Yeah, it's a bit distasteful.
They took that too far, I think. But for the character Punk was, what a brilliant idea to have him go for the tombstone and try and execute it, and then he ends up getting turned upside down.
That's
and
right.
Taker performs it on him. I just thought that was a really good sequence to end what had been a really, really impressive match.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I think it's got the power element for a big guy. It's got the certainly to a good extent the fact that you don't expect somebody to kick out of it, which I think makes it more impressive in the instances where people have. And I think it really epitomised the character. I don't know, you obviously had Kane take on the move, but there was the natural link. They were storyline brothers. I don't know how well the move would have worked on a different character. It just worked for him.
Definitely did. I think I associate Tombstone with grey gloves and black clothed Undertaker from his very early run. And although obviously he still does it, I think when I think about the Tombstone, I think about then, and like you say, it just seems they seem to fit each other perfectly. I don't know who came up with that, even calling it a Tombstone. It's just perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't find anything out about who named it, so obviously...
Let's give it to John Laurinaitis.
Yeah, but why not? I mean,
MVP.
He's clearly the finisher guy, so yeah.
I think, I don't think we've talked about moves getting watered down a little bit, and I don't think Kane executing it did that. If anything, it made it just as strong.
Yeah.
And the fact that the Undertaker used to do the eyes and the tongue out and all that when he was pinning after he'd...
Yeah, and crossing the hands over the chest, and
adds the kind of mystique and
the
the power of it, and also added to when somebody did kick out it, which tended to be a real big shock and a really big match.
Yeah.
Good choice as well. Good choice again. I like that.
Cool.
So my number 2 was the F5. So before we get into our number 1s, have you got any honourable mentions there?
The ones I talked about, the frog splash and the spear. The other ones, there were a few that jumped into my mind that I didn't go for. I always loved Macho Man's flying elbow drop. And there was, again, something about it, it seemed quite grand, him doing it. He would pose in the corner and then drop it. I loved that move. And I also loved the perfect plex.
Oh, yeah.
The fisherman suplex. My only issue with it was if he was ever in there against a massive guy, I'd just be looking thinking, well, he can't do his move, so how's he going to win? But those were a couple that sprang to my mind. What about you?
I've got a couple here that are a bit more up to date, like current wrestlers. Don't know if you've seen Cedric Alexander does something called a lumbar check. He essentially throws them up in the air and they come down on his knees. He's lying on his back and they come down on his knees. It just looks really brutal. You couldn't do that to everybody, but it's cool when they're doing their kind of flippy stuff. Yep. Not the most popular wrestler in the world, but Baron Corbin's got a great finishing move called End of Days.
Yes.
I don't know. It just looks brilliant. Maybe on someone else, like on somebody that's a bit more over, it would get a bit more love, but I think it's a really cool move.
It's a good name as well. I like the name of that. Yeah.
And a recent one that I feel that WWE have put over, which they've been doing with the character, is Drew's Claymore kick.
Yeah.
Which is becoming its own kind of thing where, he can hit that from anywhere. Completely change a match in an instant. I think I was going to say to you, I'm going to try and keep away from moves where anybody is required to slap their thigh for it to look cool, but I'll let Drew off because he's our Scottish brother. So yeah, that was my. I was really close to putting the End of Days in, but I think it was just the fact that Corbin used to look like a barista that put me off.
Yeah, that's fair.
So we've got to number 1. I've got a funny feeling that we've maybe done the same again than what we did with our Intercontinental list, and we've got the same one. But let's see what you got for number 1.
Yeah, I've got the Stunner, the Stone Cold Stunner.
I've got the Kevin Owens Stunner. Brilliant. I've got Stunner too.
Yeah, I thought that could happen. It was actually, it played a part in me not going for the RKO just because I kind of associate them as being quite similar, although they are different. They look different and all that, but I suppose the idea for one maybe comes from the other and things like that. So, So yeah, I don't know if you want me to give a bit of background.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So this is also my research told me that the credit for this goes to John Laurinaitis.
No
Johnny
way.
Ace.
Does it really?
Yep.
Is this because of his Ace Crusher?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so it'd be the same sort of line as the RKO would have gone through. So it's described as a 3/4 face lock jawbreaker.
Oh, aye.
It didn't have a cool name. Well, it had the Ace Crusher, and I don't mean to be mean to John Laurinaitis, but I do think there's quite a lot in a name for a move. And Ace Crusher, yeah. So yeah, I think, when I was just starting to get back really into wrestling, Stone Cold was he was just starting to emerge as the main guy, and we talked previously about the move somehow just suiting the performer, and there's something about the stunner, and it's not when there's the RKO, it's this sudden, the out of nowhere. With Austin, I don't know, probably 98% of his stunners, there'd be a kick to the gut to bend the guy over. There was normally, giving him the fingers and then performing the move. And it just all ran together, and it somehow just summed up who the character was.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what he was... I think when he first came in, because he was, the ringmaster when he first came into WWF.
With the $1 Million Man.
Yeah, and he was performing a version of the $1 Million Dream.
Yep.
Submission move, and he needed a proper finisher. So split credit on this one, because much as Johnny Ace came up with the basis of the move, it was apparently Michael P.S. Hayes, who suggested that Austin needed a new finisher, his own finisher, not a version of the $1 Million Dream, and suggested that he used this move. So he started trying it out, he started working it on house shows and things like that, and it started getting a reaction. It is another one of these moves that I believe is completely safe. I've never really heard of people having a lot of trouble with it, but it looks really good. It looks like it could hurt you. Not, a bit of a contrast to things like the leg drop or the people's elbow or anything like that. It looks like a legitimate finishing move. And I think it would be pretty safe to say that it was well protected over the years, because much as, people have kicked out of it, that was rare. That was very rare.
Probably the most protected finishing move in WWE, certainly.
Yeah.
It's a bit... whenever... Certainly in in Austin's heyday in the kind of late 90s and early 2000s, when he hit that kick to the gut, the crowd, you could feel the excitement from the crowd and people standing up, and it's just one of those ones that just kind of I don't know, it just explodes excitement sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whenever he hits it, it's very much like what we were talking about there with Undertaker and the Tombstone. It's a perfect move to fit the performer. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got memories of, I think, that we talked previously about the selling being important, and the brilliant performer, in the all-time category.
Please, no. You're not going to say what I think you're going to say.
The way The Rock used to sell the stunner.
No.
He overdid it a bit. Be flipping all over the place and things like that. Half the time it'd be performed in, one side of the ring, and The Rock's legs would end up tangled up in the ropes on the other side.
Yeah.
But I think, he was an entertainer, he was selling the move. But my, least, the one I would have to criticise most for the selling of the stunner would have to be Vince every single time it was done.
It kind of collapsed, didn't he?
And he would be like laying there shaking and things like that.
I really like the way Shane McMahon used to sell it. I mean, Shane McMahon sold a lot of things, particularly when it involved him falling 20 to 30 feet. But if he sold the stunner really well.
Yeah.
What about Scott Hall selling it?
Now, did Scott Hall do a bit of a flip as well?
Scott
I'm
Hall
trying to-
did like a kind of, he took it and he just stood there, almost
And then-
like he was stunned. Who?
And then he took it again. Is
Yep.
that?
Aye.
Yep.
Just
And
kind
then
of
he,
like jumped on
bounced
his
backwards.
bum. Aye.
Yeah.
I don't like The Rock selling it.
He-
I may be taking it a bit seriously, but nah, I don't like that. Rolling about like an idiot.
I think he sells it in a Mania main event the way that you would expect somebody to sell it at a house show.
Aye, that's a really good way of describing
Kind
it.
of playing it for laughs a bit. He did overdo it. And I can't remember which one of their Mania matches it was, but there was one where they performed each other's finisher on the other. Would have been Rock Bottom, not People's Elbow. And Rock did a stunner on Austin. And it was, I don't know, at the time it just seemed really weird seeing somebody else do the move. But again, I don't think it's been overused. You know, you mentioned Kevin Owens who does it. I don't think there's been, a whole host of people trying to perform it. But
Yeah.
I think you kind of summed it up when you said it just fits the character. It's just right that it's his move.
Yeah. You were talking about like people getting hurt from it. We're just at the start of the show there, we put a wee clip on about Austin talking about the stunner, and he was saying, "Didn't be hanging your tongue out of your mouth like you're Michael Jordan shooting a basketball, because you'll end up chopping it off." But it's one of these moves, a bit like the pedigree, in that it's like it's a worked move. It obviously needs to be a worked move. Although I can remember back at school when people used to run up and batter you in the balls and expect you to bend over, like they were going to hit you with a stunner. But it's a worked move, but it's just a perfect move. And I think the fact that he's able to come back after retiring and keep coming out at WrestleMania and different shows when he was commissioner, and he can still hit people with it.
Yeah.
Regardless of why he's had to retire.
And it still gets the biggest crowd reaction of the night most times.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think when we talked about doing this subject, that was one of the ones that immediately sprang to mind because it just kind of has everything.
Yeah. No, it definitely does. And I think that whole thing around storyline and it being protected and all that, it all goes together. It's all rolled up in a package. But at the end of the day, it's just a cool move.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. That was good. What did we miss? There's probably a million moves that we missed, but if you are listening and you have a very special move that you think that we missed, then give us a shout, comment on our Instagram page. We're at Middle Age Outlaws on Instagram, so yeah, give us a wee comment, let us know what we missed. So looking forward, Adam, the Royal Rumble's coming up 31st of January.
Yep.
What would you tell people to listen to if they were looking for a podcast to listen to before they were getting ready for this Royal Rumble?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure what people want to do is, remind themselves of what the best Royal Rumble matches out there are. So I think you would want to find that kind of information on a podcast, ideally. Just then you can do a little bit of comparison about what this year's is like compared to what some of our favourites were.
That's a great idea. That's a really great idea. If I was someone listening to this, I would go back and listen to episode 2 of this podcast. I'd go back and listen to our top 5 Rumble matches. So yeah, for our next episode, we are going to go with another top 5. We're going to go with a specific wrestler. The voice of the voiceless. Am I making that up?
I think that was definitely one of the phrases. Yeah.
The leader of the Straight Edge Society, the man that took Colt Cabana to court over a podcast. We're going to go with our top 5 CM Punk matches. I'm really enjoying this. I think I didn't really watch wrestling at a time when Punk either came in or became popular.
Yeah.
So I'm really enjoying going back and watching some of these matches.
Yeah, I think I was watching, but maybe not paying attention. You know, I would skip through Raw or SmackDown, just watch bits and pieces and things like that. And I remember him emerging on the ECW show, the WWE's version of the ECW show.
Yeah.
And he just became something that hadn't been there for a few years, something quite exciting. And he had this charisma and this personality, and you know, when you can tell sometimes people are faking it, and you know, somebody's trying to play a character that doesn't really reflect who they are. Whereas I think Punk just came across as, yeah, not everyone's going to like me, I don't really care about that, I'm, you know, here to do my thing, I'm here to put on a show, I'm here to prove I'm the best. And I think that was all real, you know. And there just wasn't a lot that felt real at the time. And then, you know, some of his matches, a few pretty significant promos along the way, definitely worth looking at and talking about.
Yeah, I think these days he's probably more known or more infamous for his promos than his matches, and I think that's been part of the joy of going back and watching some of these matches. He's really good in the ring. Yeah,
and I think you know, I didn't watch, you know, Ring of Honor or anything like that when he was coming up through there, and obviously he was up against some brilliant opponents, brilliantly skilled. When you talk about people like Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and you know, he was having these matches against those kind of workers. And from everything I read and hear since, they were, you know, tearing the house down all over the place in terms of match quality, given something that I don't think would have been there in WWE at the time.
Yeah.
So there'll be a hell of a lot out there of his that was so good pre-WWE that I've never seen, which is a shame. And it's the kind of thing, if it was easily accessible, I'd quite like to go back and watch.
Yeah, no, same. Oh well, I'll look forward to that. That's going to be good. That's going to be good fun. So we'll get to that in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Until then, thanks for listening. Stay safe, everybody. And until next time, take it easy. Cheers, Adam.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers.